Okay, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Artist Journey. I'm your host, Wilfred Lee, and today I'm doing a very special overseas internet portal connection podcast with the very awesome, the exuberant, and very talented filmmaker, Nick Nia. Yay! How's it going, Nick? How you doing?
It's going super well.
Yeah,
Can't complain. Yeah.
great. I haven't done a Skype podcast like this in a while, so it's pretty kind of interesting because usually there's someone beside me over here, but this is great because I love this opportunity. You're in New York and we're just here, and I fucking love that backdrop you have.
Thank you. It is the Lost World, Jurassic Park.
The Lost World. So you're a huge fan of Jurassic Park then?
I am. I'm a huge fan. I have like a ton of Jurassic Park stuff on my wall behind this camera that I can't show you.
Really?
I can show you this. I can. I've got my like limited edition Indominus Rex Blu-ray book
Jesus.
holder. Yeah, and there's a T-Rex as well.
That's some wicked detail on that, though.
It is. It was commissioned by ILM, who did the maquettes and the CG for the film.
Sure.
They okayed it.
Are you a collector of action figures and stuff like that too?
I am. Yeah. I have I've got like a ton of random stuff, but I've got like a ton of like Star Wars figures. I've got like Disney figures and
that's
Jurassic
nice.
Park. Yeah. I mean, how can you not? You know, like as like a film nerd buff of like big blockbuster cinema from like the 80s and 90s, there's like too much good merchandise.
Yeah, I think about the 80s and the 90s had some of the best toys out there. I remember even Ghostbuster toys were amazing.
Yes.
Like, there was Beetlejuice toys and stuff.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
And I love how like detailed and like I don't know, I can't explain it. I just feel like I've gone to Toys R Us recently and like the toys are so basic. I don't know what it is. Like some of the toys like have like a better quality build to them, but there's like it's like missing like something. I don't know how to explain it. But when I see like my older toy collection, there's no comparing it.
Yeah, it's definitely a charm over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still have this really old Stay Puft Marshmallow Man that I had when I was a kid. That's
amazing.
Yeah, and then I got like the Alien and Gizmo from Gremlins and Batman from Arkham Asylum. I just love it because when I was a kid, I used to just love having these toys, and when I came here, especially you're an artist, you love to draw as well. I just love seeing that as some type of a visual inspiration or reference. Like whenever I see interviews with Guillermo del Toro, he's just
who I love.
Yeah, I mean I love his whole idea. Like he made his own personal like museum that he just lives in. He has all these amazing things around him, and like just for him to walk to the washroom to take a piss, like he's just constantly being inspired by all the stuff that he has around him.
Yeah.
That's the goal that I want, to have all that stuff around.
Dude, well, look, I'm not even... Dude, you are talking to the right person. I have his fucking cabinet of curiosities right next to me.
Wow, that is awesome.
Dude, I'm a huge fan.
How is that book?
This has, like... It's amazing. It's, like, 300... It's, like, almost 300 pages of, like, the best Del Toro, like, notes and, like... his like journals and everything. Highly recommend checking this book out. It cost me like $70, but it is gorgeous.
Actually, speaking of books, I have a question. Which book or books have you gifted the most to other people?
I would have to say it's a tie between you know Austin Kleon?
I don't know.
He's like this
Austin Kleon?
Austin? Yeah, Kleon.
Okay.
So he's like a poet who like he's known for this thing called blackout poetry where he like takes a permanent marker and he'll take some text from a newspaper and he'll black out most of it but leave certain words that create poetry. Wow. And it's like very inspiring and really like visceral. Like it's just like, you know, like he's got to just come up with it on the spot. It's very like you can feel it like being very spontaneous. But he ended up making this book called Steal Like an Artist or How to Steal Like an Artist, and it's like this small like square book that it's just really inspiring to hear from another creative what that process is like and to know that you're not alone. And he gives some really amazing tips, and he really is unafraid to admit that like we as artists kind of do have to steal from each other.
Mm-hmm.
And the best artists, you can't tell how they stole what they took. And you know, like for me, that's like a huge reason I'm in love with Tarantino.
Yeah.
Because you know, like he can take something that like everyone knows, maybe by you know, like maybe like everyone's familiar with like some sort of pulpy old film, and he
Right.
can turn it into something completely new, and it's just interesting in its own right. So yeah, so like that's one book that I like have recommended and have bought for one person, and then the other one is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho,
Yeah.
which is considered like a, I mean, like that's like a lot more well known, and I just think there's just so much truth in that book. It's you can read it at different points in your life and find so much from it. And
Mm.
yeah, it's almost like my personal like travel guide. Like whenever I'm like going on a long journey somewhere, like especially when I was traveling between Korea and New York over
Yeah.
the last 10 years, like I found myself reading that book again and again and trying to make sense of why I was suddenly moving back home to the States or moving back to my second home in Korea.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I remember reading The Alchemist for the first time while I was in Korea, and I kind of resonated the same way
Yeah,
as
me
well.
too.
It's just like, you know, he's going through this mission, then he's stuck in this one place, and he's doing really well. And I felt like this is every person teaching English or something. It's like the
Yeah.
initiation, right? Trying to pass through life, going through this stage, and it's kind of interesting how we, you know, obviously, as cliche as it sounds, life gets in the way, and you know,
Absolutely.
we have these goals that we have in mind from the beginning, and just because of responsibilities, you know, the priority of this ultimate goal that you have tends to be second place and then third, and then you have to maintain all these priorities in 24 hours every single day. And
Absolutely.
then I
Yeah.
think that's sometimes dreams get lost for a lot of people because they're just kind of
Yeah.
bombarded by, you know, distractions of being an adult and trying to just live life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I can totally attest to that. Like, in terms of just like, I mean, like I feel like my whole short for Ultra Blue, or rather the feature based, like the one that we're starting to work on now,
Mm-hmm.
which the short film is based on, is so much about that
Right.
idea of like breaking into adulthood and all the things that you kind of lose along the way. And it's like the older you get, the more responsibilities you have,
Mm.
the more like people in your life and connections that you're supposed to maintain, and somehow you're supposed to keep that fire and like that passion for the thing that used to come so easy. And you know, like you get older, you get slower, and
Yeah.
and it's just harder. Yeah.
So, how have you been able to maintain your passion to keep doing what you do? Whereas a lot of people find it really hard to do it because distractions and excuses get in the way. So, has there been any type of ongoing maybe rituals that you do in terms of like having some type of a sketchbook or like a pattern routine that you do that helps you be consistent with achieving, you know, what you really want to try out?
Um, I think like intrinsically, like
Mm-hmm.
as an artist, like when I was growing up, there was always this element of like disappointment in my life, and I think in an odd way that's always kept me going. Like
Hmm.
I've never been satisfied. I've always kind of had like this idea of what I want to do, but it always falls short of what I actually do achieve or where I finally end up
Yeah.
being. And like when I was younger, the
Mm-hmm.
issue with that was that it could paralyze me. Like it could keep me from moving forward. But as I've gotten older, what it's done instead is just made me realize that like it's more about the journey. And every time you like take steps towards your truth
Mm-hmm.
and you know, sort of like your destiny, like kind of like in an alchemist kind of way,
Right.
the closer you get to that, the more electric it feels, and that in itself is important. And like I feel like as I've gotten older, that's become more clear,
Right.
which is so like, and then like on top of that, like I keep extensive journals. Like I am constantly writing. Like I feel like whenever you say that, people assume like you've got some really old fucking like Charles Dickens like I have like a quill and my
With a
fucking
feather
ink
on it
jar
and stuff,
yeah, and I'm just
You
like
should.
sitting in my with my giant ass parchment. Like but like I don't have the capacity for that. I don't have the patience for it. And so like I've done a very good job of kind of like doing the tweet equivalent of writing in a journal. Like I'll get like a journal book that has like a month, and it's got the small squares for like each day of the month.
Okay.
And whatever information I can fill in that tiny square is enough. And that's it. And then like for every day of the year, in one section of my journal, I've got like a tiny square, and I'm allowed to write a single word for each square. So
Mm.
at the end of each year, I have 365 words, and I can start to see patterns. And like, for instance, like I recently looked back like 2 years ago on like the day that I was feeling kind of out of it.
Yeah.
And I had said the same thing almost like 2 years ago in another country. And I was like, and there was like a great moment of me realizing, well, it can't fucking be life. It's got to be me. Like I'm doing something preventing me from like moving forward, or like making me feel the same way, or I'm making the same
Mm-hmm.
choices.
Right.
And it was really like eye-opening. And so like that has helped, I guess, like carve my passion forward. Like, because like it's just perspective helps keep me passionate,
Right.
because without it
Yeah.
you lose sense of why you did it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you
I think
can totally use that.
absolutely. I think that's what Facebook is trying to do now, just trying to put everybody back in perspective with those timelines and stuff, because
So that, yeah, those help, those do help.
I do like it as well, because if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't know what I was doing, or you wouldn't even care, really. Because, like, what's the point of, like, posting all this shit on Facebook if you can't reminisce, you can't just scroll down
Sure.
constantly. So
Right,
it's a
right.
good reminder, but, I mean, it's kind of keeping on tab on having this habit, what already people have been doing that have been doing successful things, is like, putting a timeline and like making sure that you're kind of, you know, building this foundation of your just kind of being, like you said before, self-intrinsic, and like being aware of where you're coming from, because I've known like Robert Rodriguez, he's huge on doing that
Yeah.
as well, and I tend to do that as well, and sometimes with like dream logging, and
Oh
just,
yeah, yeah.
that kind of helps me a lot more in terms of remembering my dreams, because sometimes whenever you're dreaming, the first thing that you remember is the last thing that happened, and then it goes
Yeah.
backwards and backwards, and then something that happens to me during the day, like I'll see this, like I'm scrolling through Facebook or I'm doing something, and I just remember of this particular person that I haven't thought of for years, and I'm like, oh, I was actually dreaming about this person today. And this,
Huh.
and it,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I kind of feel like sometimes these things subconsciously affect how I'm going to approach the day before I even start. And then when you don't even realize that you don't remember your dreams, sometimes you have these deja vus, and you don't even realize this is a deja vu because of this emotional, pattern that's been happening, maybe from
Sure, sure.
when you're sleeping or something like that. So, yeah. So speaking of like the alchemist and just like keeping these patterns and things that you've been doing before, we actually met a while ago, back in Korea. So,
Yeah.
back then, I remember you did Fear Eats the Soul, right? And but I want to talk just a little bit before that. I'm just kind of curious
Sure.
about what was your catalyst for filmmaking. Like, was there any particular point in your life that you decided, hey, this is like I want to do filmmaking?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've I've had like a, I guess like semi unfortunate pathway into it, because like it's something that I knew like when I was like really little, and like the I guess like the catalyst was always Jurassic Park. I was only like 6, but like
Oh,
I
really?
remember that was like the first moment that I was like sitting in a theater, and I felt self-aware, and I felt like I was watching something incredible, and I could feel it in all the other people, and I knew that that was what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, like transport people, and like, but I wasn't, at that age, I just didn't know that that was like a job. I thought it was like some magical thing that, like you pay money and see magic. Like it never registered to me that that was a job, like a firefighter, whatever else like kindergarten teachers would tell you to be.
Yeah.
Even being a painter or an artist, you can see the pathway to it. But a film is just a film on a screen, and you don't know how it was constructed at that age. And so that was always like the way it started for me. But it wasn't until I was like graduating from high school that I was initially going to go to school for illustration.
Oh, really?
And I didn't, yeah, and I didn't really get the grades I wanted because I think they were expecting more like, I'm sure my work, like the technical skills were not up to par anyway, but it was also very like, it was very much illustration. And I think that they were wanting like fine art, like they wanted like the fruit in the bowl and
Mm-hmm.
kind of like, you know, the nude gesture drawings. And I refused to give that to them. And I made something very dark, and it was about like all the feelings I had growing up. And that same year, I was the year that I came out of the closet, and so I was feeling a lot of different ways, and it was like it was about self-discovery, and they didn't appreciate it in the way that I thought that they would because of, you know, just whatever, for whatever reasons. But I just remember that being like a key moment of like, I worked this hard to get all these pieces together for my portfolio, and they gave me an average score, and I was just like, I'm not fucking doing this for another 4 years in college.
Mm-hmm.
And right at that time, I watched Monster with Charlize Theron and uh, what's her name, Christina Ricci,
Right.
and like that, and it was just a key. It was another pivotal moment because it was a film that I could relate to on a very like, I very much like an identity level.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was just this drama, and it affected me, and I just suddenly, it all hit me again. I was like, can I do this? Like, is this something that I can go to school for? Like, and it just clicked in my head, and like I called up the school that I got into, which was SVA, and I asked them if it was possible to change majors. I'd already gotten accepted for illustration, and they said, you know, like fill out this paperwork and write a script and then describe a dream, ironically enough.
Yeah.
And I told them about this really crazy dream that I was having. It was like recurring, and I, you know, I remember putting it on a fucking floppy disk in my friend's basement and like mailing the floppy disk in and like, and yeah, and this was like only 2004, but like, yeah. And that was that. And so like that led me into like studying film. And after like my foundation year, I discovered, I think learning how to write a screenplay is the most important part of this.
Yeah.
So I majored in screenwriting, and then that was it. And for years, I just kept that in my head. And I was like, when I graduated, I was too afraid to go to LA. I was too afraid to start my life. And I just decided, let me take a year off and go to Korea and see my mother's homeland and,
Right.
you know, just procrastinate in life.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of just changed everything, you know, and that was like the precursor to everything. But I didn't actually pick up the camera until like my second year in Korea,
Right.
when the bug got me, and I was like teaching, and I was like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. And it came back to me, and I was like, how do I begin? And I had no idea how to begin. And I just started Googling, and I just started getting hungrier, and I was just like, I gotta figure shit out. And it wasn't until I found like Philip Bloom, and then I read Robert Rodriguez's Rebel with a Crew, or Without a Crew.
With a crew, yeah.
The book about his El Mariachi experience. And it wasn't until like Robert Rodriguez plus Philip Bloom, because of like the digital technology that was like coming out with DSLRs, the combination of those two gave me enough confidence to start playing. And I just like jumped. I like bought the camera and like a really good lens. And I had no idea what I was doing, and I just started shooting things. I made this like portrait of Olympic Park. I lived like very close to it, and I put that to like some music from Gattaca.
Cool.
And
Gattaca's
that,
a great
like,
soundtrack too, by the
oh
way.
God,
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah. Oh, I just bought it on Blu-ray, and I'm so excited. Like,
That's
I haven't
awesome.
had a chance to watch it, but like I'm
Yeah.
so excited.
Right.
Yeah, but that was how it all got to Fury to Soul. And then like I feel like I have to mention there were a lot of failed moments in between of like me shooting these small things. I like paid $500 for like a Canon Power Shot back in 2009, thinking, oh, I can make a film with any kind of camera. And like I remember shooting this really disgusting like short film thing that was awful. And I remember feeling like, God, this is it. I'm fucking bad at this, and I'm not even going to continue. But then I couldn't avoid wanting to try again. And I think that's like very telling of what your calling is. When it's not hard enough that you finally give up. Like it's like a challenge, but it's a challenge that you enjoy meeting.
Right.
You know, like, yeah. And I think that was just what it was. And And then, I practiced a little more and I suddenly was like, you know what, I want to do like a little horror film makeup test. And that egged me on and it came out pretty good. And then I was like, you know what, fuck this, I'm gonna do it. And I started writing Fear It's the Soul.
Hmm.
And I wrote it over the summer and then, I just met people and I had some really great friends who helped me out. And my ex at the time was like a huge helper like, in every way. And,
Hmm.
and we all just like kind of like, it was just a real homegrown film. And then people like Sunny got involved and Raul, people that I ended up meeting all these incredible people who are like really doing well for themselves now. And it all kind of started at that time frame.
Yeah.
Um, we were all doing our own little thing and crossed paths.
Yeah, I can definitely see that because I definitely can feel and see at that moment, especially when I was in Korea, because Furious the Soul was probably one of the first, if any, like independent expat film that I could think of, in the community.
Yeah,
And at the time, the community was not really existent. It was only
yeah, yeah.
gradually
It
after
was,
that. That's when they started making those filmmakers meet up in groups and stuff like that. But
mhm.
it only takes basically one person to kind of break the mold and kind of get everyone invested. And all the people who contributed to that film are doing great now, right? So,
Yeah, absolutely.
which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
really, really awesome to see. All this progression from that point now to where it is. And I'm just kind of curious, where did you draw inspiration for Fear It's the Soul, and what was the script writing like for that?
Um, oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Like, also, I feel like I also have to mention, I
Sure.
don't know if you ever met Suno or Sarah, but like, did you hear about this film called Gimcrack? That
No.
was like for me, it was funny because like that was I would say like the first official film that I had heard of like somebody making in Korea using the same tech stuff that I was using.
Okay.
But I would say like it was like us two at that starting point, and then I would say also Sunny starting the filmmaker workshop was
Mm-hmm.
another component of like that was like I feel like that was like the birth of it.
Mm-hmm.
There was like people doing stuff beforehand, but like I feel like that was like the key moment. I feel like obliged to give them like their like spoken credit of like what they were doing at the time.
Oh, absolutely. Because
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
even now, there's so many Facebook group pages, but at that time there was
There were
nothing at
none,
all. And,
absolutely none. Yeah,
and I can totally understand the struggle that you had. You're just googling around. You just kind of literally had to go out and just kind of figure things out. And if you're lucky, you would gradually meet those people who were either unabashedly, open about what they really want to do besides teaching
sure.
after hours, or
Right,
just
right.
gradually, say, hey, I want to get into this and stuff. So,
Sure, sure, sure.
yeah. So, just to get back to it,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So for the story, how did you come up with the concept for Fear Is the Soul, and what was the writing process like for you?
Um, so again, like I think it was a matter of I mean like I hate to talk about it in this way, but like it is the truth and it is what it is. But like, like I have nothing against teaching, but teaching was really kind of the bane of my existence because like I feel like I've spent my entire 20s struggling to make money in the field that I went to school for. And then here I am like $50,000 in debt
Mm-hmm.
and still unable to support myself completely with that goal, as being a filmmaker. And so it's like I've had this love-hate relationship with teaching because it's just this like it's this thing that's allowed me to like live independently in another country for years and years and like live like a really comfortable, beautiful life. And I could afford anything I wanted. I was traveling a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and I also was able to self-fund my film and then my short film that I just shot. And it paid the way, but like it was definitely for me a sacrifice. It didn't come easy. Every day waking up, going to teach all different kinds of people, different age groups, like it's I couldn't help but feel like a fluke or like a fraud because it's just not what I was passionate about. And I believe that teachers are valuable
Mm-hmm.
parts of like society. And,
Mm-hmm.
even though it was like teaching English, I still felt like I had to do the best job I could. And I just never felt like it was good enough. And, I guess that speaks to like the perfectionism or the perfectionist side of me. But so at the time that film was brewing, it was really hard to separate like my subconscious fear of failure and like never becoming a filmmaker.
Mm.
And so for me, like it was almost like the writing was inspired by this idea that what if like the whole country got like infected with demons, and like what if like my struggle with like teaching and then following my dreams was turned into like a very physical struggle to survive. And it's like, so that's how that started. And it was kind of like these characters who were all unhappy as English teachers. And then it's like when it comes down to the wire, it's like now it's life or death. What are you going to do? Are you going to let yourself die being an English teacher, or are you going to make it back home? Like,
Yeah.
and that was like the feeling. And and so like that was like obviously like in retrospect, like I can see how deeply I was impacted by that.
Mm.
And and I was at this job, and it was a really great paying job, but I was like miserable, and I was getting anxiety attacks, and it was very hard for me to walk in the door every morning, and like I couldn't breathe. And I remember I was letting the fear and the doubt get to me, and like I just felt like so, what's the word, like, oh man, I'm forgetting the word, but like I just felt like so unable to do a good job because I was so hoping to finally just be a filmmaker, that it was starting to affect me mentally. And I'm sure half of it was in my head, but that was the problem, was that I internalized this fear of like not being good enough as an English teacher, when it was like, I've known people who've done a terrible job and could give a rat's ass how they're doing as long as they get their paycheck, and
Right.
and I always held myself to such a high standard, and I just felt like I was never meeting it. So like it was difficult. And so like that frustration fueled the writing process, and I like instilled all of the characters with like this sense of like they all came from like broken backgrounds, and they came here hoping that they were going to be saved.
Mm-hmm.
And and when everything goes to shit, it's kind of like, how do you, when it comes down to it, are you going to let fear consume you, or are you going to fight it? And the characters in the film, ultimately the ones who win are the ones who do face it. They face their fear and they get out of there. And the ones who let the fear kind of eat them, they're the ones who die.
Mm.
And then in terms of the writing process, like it came very quickly, but I feel like I had spent so much time thinking about it. I feel like that is my process. And I just finished talking to my producer on Ultra Blue about this today. Because like I'm in the process of writing the feature for Ultra Blue now, and I'm so afraid that like I'm not going to get it done in time, or like during like deadline time or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But like I just got this incredible compliment for the short film, which was that like someone who had reviewed it was like saying that it's like incredibly well written. And when I look back on the writing process for the short, I had just spent a year thinking about it. And then the writing happened in like a week and a half, 2 weeks. And because of the physical process, I just kind of like felt like I did a poor job, but I wasn't even giving myself credit for thinking about it every single day for fucking weeks and months on end.
Sure. And
trying to piece it together. And, you kind of forget all of the mental work that you do.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, yeah, so the writing process for Fear, I think, was just a combination of how I felt, plus, I was just like adding to it because I wanted to create like a genre picture, and I wanted some great like set piece scenes, but I had no money. And so it was like, there was like this creative restraint, and I was just trying to build it. And I just used a bunch of index cards to build scenes, and I kept trying to like flesh it out and get it to be larger. And I find myself following that same process now, 4 years later.
That's great. Yeah. So,
yeah.
I just want to ask you a question here. It's kind of off mark, but we'll get back into that.
Sure.
But when you hear the word successful, who comes into your mind and why?
Is this like anyone, or just like famous people, or
no? It can be anyone, personal or famous, living or dead. Just,
sure.
Just successful in general.
The two people that just popped into my head are Guillermo del Toro, and Nina Simone. And and I guess like the reason why to me that they come to mind when I think of success is just simply that they've been uncompromising their entire lives. for better or for worse. You know, like Del Toro was given a very large platform. You know, like he's been very lucky, like as a Mexican filmmaker, to enter Hollywood and do well for himself, and for the most part, have almost all of his films be director cuts. And
Mm.
as you know, they're as opulent, and they're so full of like his imagination, and the budgets are huge and sprawling, and he still manages to keep his entire signature across every frame of these films
Right.
that I like love. And then you have someone like Nina Simone, who was like very tortured in her like private life with her husband, and who was her manager, and then you and like publicly, like at a time where like civil rights were still not afforded, and she made these songs that have lasted forever and will continue to. And in a time where she was like really like faced with like great adversity, she didn't compromise her music. You know, like she had like this whole phase of like creating all these songs to like, you know, like get the black community riled up, and
Hmm.
she was unapologetic about it. And it's just like, I find that to be success. I find living through your voice to be the truest form of success. You know, like to be able to articulate your thoughts and your feelings without any fear. You know, having the courage to use your voice. And again, with Del Toro, it's a matter of he's unafraid to speak about his love of monsters and what they serve in, you know, in the overall realm of storytelling, like
Hmm.
the kind of metaphors that they can represent. And he's like one of the only people who puts monsters in films these days. And it's not like they are like a tiny element. They're this thing to be celebrated. And you know, and I can't count the amount of times I've talked to someone about one of my favorite films of his, and I'm like, you've got to watch this. And then I mention that there's a monster, and they kind of get turned off.
Hmm.
And you know, and I think Hollywood knows that, and so Hollywood is scared of that, and yet he still manages to pull these things off on his own terms.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
to me, that's like success. One day, if I can do those things, I'd feel successful.
Absolutely. Okay. So let's just go back into your filmmaking and stuff. And so, you know, now that this is with the timing and everything, you just did the release of Ultra Blue. So congratulations on
Sure.
that.
Thank you.
Like you said before, a lot of good rave and glowing reviews and stuff. So this was something that you were recording while you were in Korea, right?
Yeah, I filmed it back in September
Mm-hmm.
of last year, like right before I left Korea. It was like we shot it over Chuseok, actually, like Chuseok weekend.
Oh, so it only took like 3, 4
Yeah, it only
days?
took 2 days. Two
Oh,
days. We
wow.
shot 2 days, but they were like 17-hour days.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean this is the short, so like the film's runtime is 20 minutes.
Right.
And it was always meant to be like a tone poem slash conceptual piece to introduce people to like the world that I'm making,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like autobiographical, but I want it to be surreal, and I want it to feel how it feels when you remember life, as opposed to like trying to mimic. I'm not trying to make like a timepiece, like, you know, like where it's like you want to emulate everything exactly. I want it to feel how I remember it today.
Sure.
And so like it was always meant to be a little bit more like chaotic and very like kinetic and forensic and frenzy. That's not English. Me English no good.
But considering that, now that you're in New York, does it still feel like that way? Now that you're away from Korea, you know do
Does
you,
the
the film, you know, that all those feelings that you've gathered from creating the film for Ultra Blue, you know, all those ideas, the feelings, the surrealism, the slight surrealism that you mentioned before. Does it still resonate even though you're still now that you're in New York? Because when you go back to your, like, back home to where you are,
Sure,
it feels
sure.
like you're just waking up from a really long dream, you know, that it's
Yeah, yeah,
basically your
yeah.
last goodbye piece before coming to
It is,
New
yeah, yeah.
York. So I don't know, I'm just kind of curious, how do you feel about that overall, that kind of timing? Like, you just released something, this was the thing that
Mhm.
everyone's exposed to what life is like in Korea, you know,
Sure, sure, sure.
and to your personal insight, and now you're in New York. So
I mean, absolutely, it feels just as surreal, maybe even more so, because it does feel like a dream. I just feel like the last. I was in Korea for 8 years. I'm 29 now. I left when I was 21.
hmm
And I only came back to the States for like a total of like 9 months in between these years. And I often feel like it wasn't real, like it didn't happen. Like I feel like sometimes like I'm 21 and I had this like really long dream, and then I woke up and I'm still here and I'm still just 21, like just out of college.
Mm.
And it's like, like it feels very surreal. Like, and I have all these like memories that I still like am holding on to, and it's also very difficult. I will say like the first few months were very like emotional for me, and like like a certain smell or a certain song or a picture or like
Yeah.
food would just like bring everything flooding back to me. And I think as an artist, like I've come to accept this about myself, which is just simply that I think I'm gonna be in a perpetual state of like heartbreak and joy
Mm.
about the past. Like
Mm-hmm.
I can't stop thinking about the past and all the sadness and beauty and happiness that it brings me, that my memories bring me. And like
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm obsessed with nostalgia. And so
Mm.
for me, Ultra Blue is a pathway into that.
Mm.
Like the feature is meant to be a love letter to my 20s, which
Mm-hmm.
by extension is about my life in Korea, and there's no way to separate that.
Mm-hmm.
I became an adult in Korea,
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
and yeah, and so yeah, so it's really amazing. And then like to watch it with an American audience this past weekend was really interesting because I was so scared that like they wouldn't understand like the humor. I feel like the humor is slightly off kilter because I've been very inspired obviously just by Eastern culture, and I got to connect with my mother's culture, and and just like something as simple as like like two characters squatting, like doing the Korean squat while like
Yeah.
talking about life. It's like that's not something that you would see in America, and it was really joyous for me to like hear people mention those things like in the Q&A. They were like, it's got such a unique flavor, and
Yeah.
they were like, there's so many interesting things about the film, but like it's like in another country, and that it was like very diverse, and it was just like super refreshing, and so it was all really amazing things to hear. And um yeah, like just like yeah, it's been a blessing. It's been a huge blessing.
Great. And it kind of feels like you might have been slightly touching on the topic, but especially with the film itself. But what what advice would you give to your 21-year-old self
Yeah.
when you first came to
I
Korea?
mean, and this is kind of like the tagline of the film, and I feel so strongly about this. Like, I want it plastered everywhere when it's like packaged with the feature as well. But like,
Mm-hmm.
just we won't always be 20 something and lost.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I wish someone would have told me that.
Mm.
It seems obvious, and it seems like it seems like something that you should know, but like when you're going through it, you just completely forget that it's not always going to feel like this. And like, like, I don't know, I can only speak on my behalf, but like I can't count the amount of times that I've like felt lost
Mm-hmm.
and unsure and like doubted my entire life path and all the things when I was younger growing up, thinking, yeah, that's who I'm going to be. Like by 25, I'm going to be this person. Like I'm going to be this like big filmmaker. I'll be directing 2 films a year. I'll be doing that. Like, like all the grandeur that you conjure in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And then and then you get older and you get older, and life doesn't play out that way. And you start to like lose the, like you just don't add up to the potential of who you thought you would be. And that's like really debilitating. And I had to learn to like accept that that was like a compass, like a goal to reach for, but like where I am on the mountain as I'm climbing is more important. And like you're going somewhere, but like you just have to remain present. And like I just feel like those are all these things that like I learned that I just and I obviously cannot separate it from my like identity as a gay person as well. Like there's a lot of things that like I thought coming out was gonna save my life. Like I thought like, all right, I'm out. There's nothing worse than that. Like now my life is gonna make sense. Everything is gonna connect.
Mm.
But it's like no, you come out, you're okay with your identity, you're confident enough to be who you are, but you still have to figure out your entire life like everyone else. And I wish somebody would have pointed that out. I spent so much time trying to come to terms with who I am that I like lost sight that of adulthood and
Mm-hmm.
coming of age. And and so like I wish somebody would have told me that. And I wish somebody would have told me that like that I wish somebody would have told me how lonely it was going to feel. And I'm sure that like part of that has to come into play because I like grew up for the last 10 years in another country. And as much as my mother's Korean, like it's America that I grew up in, and she's pretty American now. And it was a new culture, and it was different, and it was difficult, and language and
Mm.
culture and everything is just like, yeah. So like those are all the things that I'm hoping to instill the film
Yeah.
with that overarching theme of, yeah, we're lost right now, but eventually we get out of the wilderness.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point that you brought up about like even when you come out that you thought it would kind of help, it still would obviously be like a very cathartic moment. It's like it's a
Sure,
really
sure.
integral part of your character and your identity, but still achieving your ultimate destiny in life is just as important,
Yes.
right? So
Absolutely.
I'm just my question to you is, what do you feel, or what is your ultimate destiny, or like what do you feel it is
Sure.
that you're trying to achieve?
Um, I mean, it actually like this came to me very clearly very recently, and I do think my ultimate destiny is to tell stories. And when I look back at like film, when I look back at my life, and when I look back at even the way that like, like even whenever I'd have to, when I like bring up like events from my past, I can't ever bring it up without providing context to the other person. Some of
Mm.
my friends, like my closest friends or family, like want to shoot themselves in the face because like I can't help but like articulate the journey of what the story's got to be. And I just come to terms with the fact that like the reason I wanted to be an actor, like I wasn't sure, and so for a long time I couldn't be one. And it wasn't until this film where like it became very autobiographical that I understood that it's a process of self-discovery and telling a story, and that a story can be told in so many different ways,
Mm.
and it can happen through your performance, it can happen through you remembering who you were at a younger age and projecting it, which is what I did in the film.
Right.
And like that, and then the screenwriting and telling stories through pictures, and like just drawing and poetry and everything. Like I think my ultimate destiny is to tell stories and to help people heal and find their own truth by being as truthful as I can be, like with my own journey.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what saved my life growing up. Everything from like Calvin and Hobbes to, like whatever pop songs were on the radio to like film and Jurassic Park. They're all stories, and those things helped me get through my childhood.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I just to kind of touch up on that, I can't remember if it was Carl Jung or Freud, but a really integral quote I remember them saying was, "Your character is your ultimate destiny." Sometimes, like
Yeah.
we've go through our entire lives trying to really kind of figure out who you are, and personality and character, no matter how similar they seem, it's so different. Personality is something that you can
You're right.
carry
Yeah.
constantly, but a character is based on the decisions you make and stuff.
Absolutely. It's
And
like
then
it's what you earned.
yeah, and I think that's the reason why movies and stories can be so amazing, because it's about these people making these like very definite decisions that kind of alter their
Sure.
character into like an inevitability of good or bad or tragic or
Sure, sure.
sad. So that's why they can seem so appealing to that kind of stuff. It's interesting because you mentioned several times about you wanted to come to Korea to connect to your mom's culture. So your mom's obviously Korean
Yeah.
and stuff. How about your dad? Where's your dad from?
He's Scottish and Spanish.
So, okay.
But he was born in Brooklyn, yeah.
Great. So I'm kind of the same, like I come from a mixed
Yeah,
heritage and stuff. So that's something that kind of resonates a lot with me too. Like that. Usually when people ask me, like why did you come to Korea, I always kind of say the same thing. It's because I wanted to know more about my dad's culture and stuff. So now that you've spent 8 years of your formative lives, right, in
Sure.
Korea,
Yeah, absolutely.
and what do you feel now about the Korean culture, and how has that helped make any connection with your mom, or just with that kind of side of yourself in general?
Sure, sure. Well, I think I had a slight um what's the word, like affliction towards Korean culture in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I had a honeymoon period, and then I suddenly got past the honeymoon period and entered like the real culture, and there were a lot of differences that I just couldn't understand, and being much younger, like 22, 23, I refused to want to understand.
Right.
And so it became really difficult for me, and yet certain things did make me see my mother in a more clear light.
Mm.
Like certain things, and it's like it's an interesting thing. I don't know how you feel, but like I'm sure, like, I mean, you speak Korean and Spanish, right?
Yeah.
And English, yeah. So it's like, to be really frank, like I feel like I'm gonna spend my entire life trying to understand, or not understand. I understand my mother, but like trying to get to a place where like I can understand what my mother wants to articulate completely. Because like I can't speak Korean. My mother's English isn't perfect.
Mm.
And I know that there's a frustration in her when she wants to get very deep with me and she
Mm.
can't articulate it. She just
Mm.
can't. And it's like I spent my entire life being unable to get close to my mother in that sense. And then I'll see friends have this relationship with their parents, and it's like, like it's an odd thing to like look at your mom and like try to like, like I feel like deep in my heart I can feel it, and maybe that's enough, but like there's this like sadness when it comes to like you start to realize how important language is. For me, I think that was like the game-changing moment in terms of Korea in my life, the role that it played, because I feel like I had spent so much of my life being frustrated at my mother for not being able to articulate with me. And for the first time, like I feel like I got older, I understood more that it was my fault that I wasn't able to articulate in Korea, and that I was the one who needed to pick up the slack, and also just see the culture for what it was. And it made me see my mother in a very new light and see her struggle, and it made me appreciate my struggle, and yeah, and that moving forward was a huge shift for me for the last 4 years until my present day today.
Mm.
Yeah, and now I can say like it's like I couldn't see it at the time, but like now that I've stepped away from Korea and now I'm moving back in the States, and I know that this is like a permanent move back, I can it's becoming clearer the things that I picked up in Korea that when I see with my friends, or like even in a film, like things that I articulated or actions or body language are very Korean, and now I realize that like subconsciously the culture has absolutely affected who I am for
Sure.
the better.
Yeah, it should always be like that, right? I mean, it's kind of
Yeah,
like a compliment to being in the place that you were, that kind of shapes you, because there's only so much that you can take back with you, no matter where you go.
sure.
And it's
Yeah,
it's exactly like that with any type of relationship that you get into. You can never leave any type of relationship without leaving some part of you
I
into
agree.
that
Yeah,
person, and the same thing of them. And then all those pieces, whatever broken or missing or mended or whatever, still are shaping you into, like we mentioned before, about that character that you're meant to be, and
absolutely.
hopefully goes for the better when you meet, these better relationships in the future. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, it's kind of interesting to hear your own backstory about that stuff, because I had like the very same similar experiences like that. I mean, when I was growing up in Canada, like I didn't know any Korean really at all. I only knew like less than 1%. So I really wanted to make it a goal of mine to really learn the language and kind of get to understand that. And I think I definitely can understand my dad, even though I'm so far away from him. But
Sure.
it's been interesting to kind of dive yourself into that culture rather than just read about it, but just live that culture for a really, really long time.
Yeah.
And then sometimes even the hardest part can be leaving, just leaving and moving
Absolutely.
on, because you're still, living the alchemist life and stuff. So
Yeah.
um,
No, for sure.
I'm just kind of curious, what was your reason for leaving Korea, and how has it been like now that you've been away?
Um. Well, I think it was twofold. One, I felt like my journey was coming to an end in Korea.
Hmm.
Maybe not permanently, but this chapter of my life. Um, just like my 20s are coming to a close, and I went through a lot in the last 2 years. Like there was like so much growth, and it was happening so quickly and constantly that it was overwhelming.
Hmm.
And it is the basis for Ultra Blue, and I just felt like I needed to move on, and like I just felt like if I were going to stay in Korea, then that would have been a reason to continue onward.
Right.
But I just kind of had to accept that I am American, and
Mm.
Korea is a huge part of who I am. But like at my base level, this is really where I grew up. And even though I became an adult in Korea, my foundation is here, and culturally I had to accept that, which was very hard
Mm.
to deal with at first, but I came to terms with, because it's like, you sometimes want to feel accepted by like something new and great, but you kind of have to work with what you've got and where you've come from. And I also just felt like I've spent a long time avoiding being an adult in America,
Mm-hmm.
and I just felt like it was time to like take that challenge on. And then the other part of it was simply that like, I understood that like if I really really want to take this film seriously, and I'm kind of considering this my first true feature film.
Mm-hmm.
The way I'm like really big on music, and I'm really big on like this concept in my mind that like Fear is the Soul was kind of like my EP.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of like my mixtape, and now this is my first LP. Like this is like my first real debut,
Right.
because like I feel like my voice was still developing. I wasn't sure, and like funny enough, there's a lot of similar themes in both films. So like I think my voice was getting there, but like this is like truly like with the last 4 years since the first film, all the things I've done, between directing music videos and starting companies, and like just like growing and having relationships that like meant so much to me but had to end, and having to grow from that as well, and the heartbreak, and and just being older and more patient and wiser, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like all of these things have come into play, and it's just like I just felt like in order to get this next film made, I had to return here and be more like potent in terms of like, like it would have been more difficult for me to like find all the necessary pieces to get the film made
Mm-hmm.
in Korea, simply because I don't have enough of the language,
Mm-hmm.
and language really it's really powerful. And I just felt like it was time to be here and be able to like get things done in my mother tongue, so
Right.
to speak.
Yeah, it definitely
Yeah.
feels like you've gathered all this cumulative experience that you felt like
Yeah.
you could have been lacking when you first came, and now
Sure.
it's like being, it's like just like any adventure, you come back to the old world, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
you're ready to traverse into new territories. So
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. So you kind of touched up on music, how it's a huge inspiration in your life. Just even mentioning about Gattaca, like
Sure.
honestly one of the best soundtracks. So
Yeah.
what kind of how does music inspire your filmmaking process? Do you do any methods, for example, like Tarantino, where you listen to a particular song and you can kind of see how it would fit into a particular scene, or do you listen to a song on repeat while you're writing or anything?
Mhm.
Just kind of curious about that
Yeah.
symbiotic relationship you have with that.
I mean, absolutely similar to like what Tarantino speaks about, and you know, you can see it in his films. Like it's very, the music's always like such an integral part to the film.
Mm.
I don't see how I could separate the two. And I mean, like, again, like to go back to like how I treat my films as like an EP or like as albums and records.
Right.
I mean, like, I just find myself more inspired by musicians than I do by actual filmmakers. There's like very few filmmakers that I like gravitate towards.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
then in general, I just love film. But
Mm.
like, I honestly find myself constantly coming back to music, and like some of my favorite albums will like often dictate or help keep me focused on the task at hand in terms of writing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, and like it can be lyrical, it can be like literally the lyrics that are keeping me attached to a certain feeling that I need to like sustain in order to get the scene finished. I constantly put music on repeat, you know, like I'm constantly on the lookout for new music and new artists. And a huge part of how the artists present themselves to me is like very inspirational to how I present myself, you know, as a filmmaker and now as an actor. It's like, it's kind of like a symbiotic thing, but it's like I used to be really afraid to admit that I wanted to be an actor. And then I realized, well, I also just didn't want to be treated like a rag doll in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't feel like I didn't feel like, you know, like you see my face and it's like, oh, you could play like the punk kid or like the random kid. Like it's like they type you without, you know, without giving you any chance to like challenge yourself. And I just figured I need to write the role that I want to play. And
Right.
just so happened that this first role is really integral to like my adulthood and who I've just become as a filmmaker. And again, it's very musical. I mean, even like my artist name being McNeon is very much inspired by like having a stage name as opposed to like being just who I am. Like I wanted to create like a clear differentiation between the two.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you, it gives more like empowerment to yourself in the sense
It
that
does.
you are completely self-sufficient, that you are capable of, you know, creating your own stories and ideas, and you're creating your own voice and being able to know, the technicalities of it and
Sure.
what you want to put on the screen and, kind of reflect that with your own acting. So I think that's great. I just, unfortunately, like I'm talking with you and while we're talking, the quality's so bad, you look like a ghost right now.
Oh no.
But, no, but the quality of the audio is fine, which is great. So
Yeah.
I just want to keep it like that. But, I just want
I actually can't see you either. I've been staring at like a beautiful headshot of yours for the last whatever minute.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's probably better than what everyone else is looking at me right now.
That's funny.
So, I just wanted to just end it on this one last question. But,
Sure.
if you could have a billboard in Times Square, what would you have on it?
If I could have something on a billboard. That's a very hard question.
You're in New York. It's possible.
Yeah. Let's hope. Let's hope in a few years.
Yeah.
I would have to say, if I could put anything on a billboard, I would write "All is kinetic."
All is kinetic.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Everything is in motion, and it never ends, and we just kind of take turns. Yeah. I mean, like it. Yeah. To me, like the one thing that I feel like you like live your life from cradle to 21, and everything is like pretty clear cut and explained to you, and you make all these self discoveries along the way. But like the first true decade of like repetition, I think, is your 20s, where like whatever happened to you in the first 20 years of life start to become like patterns. And then and so for me, this is the end of that first cycle, I think. And it is a cycle because here I am back in New York City, and back where I was when I was 21, except there's so much more that I've gained. but yet I find myself feeling the same way almost. Like, there's like similar things happening, and like with the seasons changing and it's almost spring, I almost feel like I'm graduating from college again, but like in a different way. And it's just like, it's just a really telling sign of how much everything in life is like a cycle, and you come in and out of it, and that it's okay. So like if you're going through a rough patch, just know that it's going to come back, whenever the cycle ends. But like in the meantime, the good is also going to come back, and
Right.
and I just feel like it's just going to keep rolling over. Yeah.
So everything is kinetic.
Yeah. All is kinetic.
Great. So, Nick Neon, thank you so much for doing this podcast. I really appreciate it. I
No,
mean,
thank you.
like I said before, I think you're a really great, inspirational, and very pivotal person who made a huge influence in the filmmaking community in Seoul. And I think it was a great opportunity to meet you in Korea. And
Yeah.
congratulations to everything you've been doing and with Ultra Blue. And I'm
Thank
really
you.
hoping that everything in New York goes great, and
Thank you.
just continue on with your ultimate destiny. So I'll just end this I'll end this podcast here, but let's stick around and let's just talk for a little bit later. So anyways,
Sure.
thank you everyone who's been watching for this, and hopefully we'll have this up pretty soon and you guys can share. And please, Nick, is there any place or site that you want people to check out your work?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Please check out like the film site, which is connected to my main site. But
Mhm.
if you search like ultrabluemovie.com,
Yeah.
we've got like a site up now with a lot of like news and like stills, and the soundtrack is up there. And there will be more information coming soon. We've got a list of the festivals we've gotten into and our award as well. And and then if they want to see like just my general work that I've directed over the last few years, they can also go to nickyneon.com. And I also feel like I have to mention this. Ultra Blue is playing in Korea, in Seoul, in June at the Korean Queer Film Festival. So
Fuck
if anyone is
yeah!
watching, they should totally go fucking watch it. And I have like a bunch of friends that I've been like dragging around, and I'm telling them to go watch it, and I think they will. So that's exciting.
Definitely. Awesome. I'll definitely put all that stuff on the descriptions when I post this.
Cool.
And hopefully you guys in Seoul, let's make a Facebook group to meet up and make an event. I'm sure there will be one, and it'd be awesome to check out Ultra Blue and definitely check out all his websites. So thanks again, guys, and have a great day wherever you are. Take care. Bye-bye.